Can someone give me an update on participants? I think we're still gonna...
Yeah, we're 26. We expect quite a big turnaround. We had more than 140 people registering for it. But yeah, you never know how many people actually pitch at the end.
So shall we get going and catch up with...
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our ASIN webinar, which is about the ISO 59000 series, which are boldly christened the new gold standard in circularity, ? My name is Suzanne Karcher. I'm a director and a co-founder of the African Circular Economy Network. And before we even start of why do we require a standard, I want to just quickly give you a bit of a background what an ISO standard is in the first place. So the International Organization for Standardization creates actually standards that help companies and organizations to improve their processes, products, and services. And it's a global standard. And the idea really is to either improve quality or increase consistency or efficiency, or to better meet customer requirements, or to better comply with regulations. And what makes it so exciting is that an ISO standard is by default global, and that means that it is a universally applicable concept. There is no gray in between how to interpret certain things. So, and I think that is also why at some stage someone woke up to the fact, and I think it was Mr. Kircher in 23 to say, by now we have already 221 definitions of people that are proclaiming to be circular economy experts, and they put their very own spin on the definition, and that people felt it really is time to harmonize the understanding, and that there is a fundamental shift needed. We all understand, we all need to push for the circular economy, but we need to have a joint voice and a joint understanding. And also there were questions lingering regarding the compatibility of other terms like sustainability and economic growth. And if you look, for example, at how the word sustainability has been, beaten into submission and really abused with greenwashing, you wanted to say, let's that please not happen to circular economy. Let's get really clear and sharp on what it means for everyone, so there is no ambivalence. Because otherwise, there is really the chance that companies might use it to greenwash themselves, call something that's not really in a circular economy scope, a circular economy action, and that could really very much deadlock, the really more proactive initiatives that we hope to see coming out of the circular economy agenda. And I think that's also reflected in our nonprofit organization's vision, which really is to build a restorative African economy that generates well-being and prosperity, which is inclusive of all its people through new forms of economic production and consumption, which maintain and regenerate its environmental resources. So here in Africa, we are also very big on a social delivery component of the circular economy, something that we have not really seen in the global north that much. So about ASIN, quickly, we are a group of circular economy experts from different fields. We started out in 2016 with a bunch of volunteers that had a big dream to develop the voice for Africa in the circular economy space, to communicate, what is needed on an African agenda that really delivers home benefits for Africans from the circular economy agenda. We are a non-profit organization, and we have really developed in a very short space of time quite a continental footprint. We have 4 pillars in which we achieve our vision, and that is really that we consider ourselves a clearinghouse of information. So we are big on knowledge sharing. We have developed master classes. There's a lot of free stuff that we also share because we really want to further knowledge on this continent very quickly. So there is no time now to try to hide things with IP. That's why we have also training and awareness sessions a lot. We have started hosting a lot of networks and events. Some of you might have been part of the Hotspot, which was a great event, the first event that ASIN held here on the African Place. But we were also part of events like the World Circular Economy Forum, where we were in Rwanda, which was an amazing experience. And then we also have closely a lot of researchers. We get a lot of top-notch research flowing into our discussions, because also universities, TVET colleges work very closely with us. And today, this is our program. This was my welcome. From now on, I shall be quiet and actually leave the floor to the experts. We will start out with Hans Kröder from Learn to Improve Your Planet. And Hans will really give us an overview on the fundamentals of the 59,000 series, the key elements and the strategies. That will then be followed by Catherine Bott from the Nordic Circular Hotspot, who will give us a perspective through the lens of Europe, also touching a little bit of are there unintended consequences in terms of the just transition aspects of the circular economy agenda in Europe. And we will then also have Mariana from ECOS talking about the perspective from a non-profit. What does it do for a non-profit in Europe with environmental concerns? How deep is, in her opinion, this ISO series going? How practical is it? And then finally, we will round this discussion off with Honore, who is a standards board expert from Rwanda, because obviously this is very interesting to us to find out, well, how well does this all work and how applicable is it really in the African realities? So this is going to be our program. We will then have questions and answers from you as the audience. And then I have a couple of questions that I will ask the individual participants, but I hope that we can still slot in a few questions of yours when the going gets hot. Okay, let's start there. Hans, please, the floor is yours. I will actually unshare from my side. Thank you.
Yes, good morning, all of you. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this wonderful event. I think the African continent has a huge potential on the circular economy, so it's very interesting to share the standards that has been developed by ISO. I will share my presentation.
Please introduce yourself in the chat. Sorry.
Yes. You can see the presentation, Susanna?
Perfect.
Okay. Yes, this has been a wonderful journey, but not an easy journey. We started in 2018 already with the preparations. It was an initiative from France for a new technical committee, which has developed 5 standards from ISO. And the need for a transition from linear to circular economy is really a big need which we have on the planet, because if we are not doing anything, we need at least 3 planets in 2050, and the circularity situation is even becoming worse. So we may even need more than 3 planets. So we really need to do something. And that's why ISO decided to develop 5 standards. And there's a first standard, which is a fundamental standard. And the numbers of these standards are in the 59,000 series. So the 59,004 is really the fundamental standard, which delivers you all the terms and definitions, the principles, the circular strategies or circular actions. And then there are 4 other standards which are building on this fundamental standard, and the number 59,010, where Honoré was one of the chairs of this group to develop this standard, how to transition your linear business model to a circular business model. And then 59,020, where I am the convener of this development, is how to measure the circularity performance and how to assess the outcome. And then 59,040 is a very important standard also for African countries, because it's 59,040 is a product circularity data sheet, which is helping to enhance the transparency of data and the reliability of data when you exchange the circular data in a value chain or value network. And then the 59,014 standard is very important also for African countries, because this is focusing on the recovery and recycling of secondary materials. And when you look at these 5 standards, it's very interesting that 2 of these standards are guidance standard, that's 04 and 010. So they do not include requirements. The other 3 standards do include requirements, and then 59040 and 014, they are also certifiable. So it's a very interesting mix of 5 standards, 2 without requirements and 3 with requirements. And the overarching objective of our work of this technical committee is to contribute to the sustainable development goals of the United Nations. And that means sustainable development in general. So the overarching objective of these standards are to create a better society, a better well-being, better health for the people. And of course, also getting a better connection with the nature, with the environment, with the planet, no pollution, regenerating ecosystems. So that's the overarching objective of the standards that we have developed. And when you look at the definition, Susanna already said there are many definitions out there on what is a circular economy. And when we started with developing a definition, there were more than 100 definitions that were being used in real practice, but also a lot of definitions from the academic world. And the definitions that has been defined by ISO is that a circular economy is an economic system that uses a systemic approach. And this is already very important, this systemic approach. And to maintain a circular flow of resources by recovering, retaining, or adding to their value of the resources. And here it comes, and this is the overarching objective while contributing to sustainable development. So keep that in mind. We should always try to find new circular business models that contribute to society and to the environment and to the economic system. And there are 2 notes in the definitions that resources can be considered both stocks and flows. And from a sustainable development perspective, the inflow of virgin resources is kept as low as possible. And the circular flow of resources is kept as closed as possible to minimize emissions and losses like waste of resources from the economic system. And that means that we have defined 6 principles, which are the key fundamental principles when you start thinking about transitioning your linear solutions to circular solutions. So we have the systems thinking, which also means that you have a long-term approach to try to get the products and solutions at a longer lifetime, creating value and what value can be created, sharing value. That means collaboration. We cannot do it alone. We need to collaborate within value chains and throughout different value chains like value networks. Resource stewardship for the resources we have by closing, slowing, and narrowing down the flows. Resource traceability, that means be accountable, also for sharing information. And ecosystems resilience, that means that we want to contribute to the regeneration of ecosystems and biodiversity. That's a terminology. We're not talking about recovering, but we're talking about regeneration of ecosystems. And that means that when you talk about create resource value, you have different solutions which you can try to apply in your business model and retain resource value, recover resource value, and also regenerate the ecosystems. So this standard 5904, where also Honoré will explain a little bit more about, is really helping organizations, public and private, and it can be large organizations, but also small and medium enterprises, to get what are the right circular actions or circular strategies when you want to transition your current operations. And then the 59010 standard goes more into depth about how to do this transition, setting the goals, determining your strategy. And it's also talking about what are the challenges and what are the enablers, because we also need enabling conditions, for example, from government, which makes it more convenient for the private industry to do this transition, and like the financial systems, the tax systems, the law and regulations on waste management, for example. So we really need to work together globally on these different elements. Then the standard I'm responsible for is about measuring and assessing the circularity performance. And it's a framework, it's a very simple framework, but where you set your boundaries, you start measuring, gathering the data, calculating the data. We have formulas and KPIs, and then you do the assessment of the outcome, where you build the bridge to sustainability, and then sustainability on social, environmental, and economic issues. And the framework is very important because you can measure on different levels, like regional level, a country level, or a city level. But you also can measure on inter-organizational level. That means a part of the value chain or a group of organizations. Or you start measuring your own organization or maybe some functional units of your organization. And then the fourth level is the product or service or solution level. And the World Business Council calls this macro, meso, micro, and nano level. But we decided to have a little bit different terminology. So what we do is we monitor the goals and the actions. We measure the resource flows. We assess the sustainability impacts, and we have different core circularity indicators on the resource inflows, outflows, on energy, water, and economic. And then we also have additional indicators. Some of them are circular indicators, some of them are not circular, but they are helping the organization to get a better context, a better measurement of the context. So when you look at the standard 59014, the World Resource Institute was initiating this standard and using economics to advance sustainable, just societies, which is also very important for the African continent. Because when you look at all kinds of negative impacts which are happening in many different sectors, whether it's plastics or textiles or electronics or ship wrecking, it's all over very bad circumstances when you see the recovery processes and the recycling processes. Bad labor conditions, there are very human rights violations, child labor, there is environmental pollution, communities which are being negatively impacted. So we really need to do something on this kind of recovery and recycling of resources. And that's why this standard 59014 has been developed. It has very strong principles like respect from the stakeholder interests, like the communities, the indigenous people, the value chain responsibility, safe, healthy, very important, the conditions, protection of the environment. So here you also see the sustainable development perspective reflected in this standard. And this standard has a lot of requirements on the operational processes, how you do your classification, your recovery, your collection, your sorting, the processes themselves from recovery, and of course also logistics. And then the last standard is about the product level, because the other standards are focusing on the organizational level. This is the product level, like the exchange of circular data between organizations. And there is a template being developed which is helping to enhance the transparency and the reliability of this circular data. And it's set up with statements which are mandatory statements which you must use. And these statements are being aligned with the KPIs we have developed in 59020. So it's really helping you to measure also the circularity data in a transparent and reliable way. And there are additional statements which an organization can define. So when we look at the circular economy and when we want to work on the transition together, it also requests a change in mindset. A change in mindset from the governments, from the industry sector, of course, but also from the consumers and from the citizens. We all need to work together on this challenging, let's say, transition of our economy. So I'm looking forward to collaborate towards this circular economy together and to a sustainable world. I'm looking forward to your questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hans. I think that was an excellent laying of a foundation, very broad, very but still very detailed. Thank you so much. I would now like to call on Catherine to give us drill a bit deeper in terms of what does it mean for Europe and the Nordic countries as well. Thank you.
I will. Let's see. Now I am about to share my screen. Make sure that just a second. Here we go. So I'm sharing.
Africa now a mirror committee, TC323, and ASEAN is actually sitting on that to develop for South Africa, also in accordance to the guidelines, our own standards. Just fun fact.
You got my screen now?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being invited to talk about the new gold standard. It has been a thrill to get to know you all through the ISO. So it's also not only connecting material, but connecting humans. And I'm very happy to share perspective from the global north, or actually in the Arctic where I am now. It is no more than a month ago since we were together, and it was a thrill to understand how we understand more deeply how our markets are connected when I was invited to the South Africa Circular Economy hotspot. And understanding how our materials are on the journey. And this is also why we have this MOU, that we want to understand how we, from different points from the value chains, can collaborate. And especially now when we have the ISO as a backbone for collaboration. So thank you for inviting me to see how we might bridge or align the ISO with more regional initiatives, what is happening in the European region now, and also how we are working in the Nordic region to see how we might take down and zoom into operationalize the ISO that Hans shared so very overall and overarching, but very accurate about. It has been immensely important to get a standard and we have the same language, and it has shown results already that instead of discussing what is your circular economy and my circular economy, now we can refer to that there is actually a common ISO that connects 100 nations that stands behind the ISO, which was launched this summer. This is also giving us some experience how it works in the market. So I will share some how the European continent will approach this. And it's also on the good and the bad. But I remember I learned about 10 years ago, being a circular economy activist, somebody coming from systems design, a very good friend recommended, if you want to change the system, go ahead, change the standard. If you ever get the opportunity to be part of a standardization for circular economy, raise your hand and you will be part of something, a big transitioning the economy. So I drew up this tree because the ISO is like the pole of the tree. It works for all kinds of sectors and industries. It's neutral and it doesn't really connect to specific policies or specific industries. But what we see now is happening in Norway and in the Nordic is our governments are very fast connecting the standardization process and the national strategies and roadmaps to provide resources for construction, ISO for construction, ISO for boat and maritime. Hans was mentioning like shipwrecking and end of life, how we work with circular economy in soil, how in service industries as tourism, and so on and so on. And this is only the mere beginning. I think we will see this tree is growing richer and richer with lots of branches, and we will see them be interconnected. And I guess that's going to be the beauty of the circular economy, because the value is between industries, not only in a sector. And we also see how the ISO is connecting different families. So I represent the Norwegian Standardization Institute. I was last week in Brazil and also presenting how the Fiespe that has been driving and leading some of the working groups has been leading from the Latin American side, but also been a strong contributor for the version we see now. And myself, I'm onboarding now a European initiative, which is driven for the European Committee for Standardization, and it is the Swedish Institute for Standards driving this next level for the European region, and I will share a little bit about that. But first of all, understanding the driving forces of Europe in the circular economy, it is also to understand how it's not only the environmental goals and greenhouse reduction that is driving this. We see fast-paced technological innovation and digitalization coming in, and we see that also reflected in some of the standards that was presented by Hans. But I would like to dive. Also, the consumer market is now expecting something to happen. We have only 5 years left till we see the 2030 goals. It's happening really approaching fast. So this is also why market engagement is getting stronger. And what I want to cover now would be the resource independence and policy and regulatory frameworks that are really significant in Europe right now. We must be aware that almost none of the global resources emerge from Europe. But the consumption is extremely high. And understanding that Europe only produces 3% of the global resources that are in loop and are the consumer of 25%, and basically have no really good recycling systems gathering and getting these materials back in the market. This is a turning point for also driving the very, very strong push for taxonomy and EU regulation, but also why there is such a consensus of applying the standards to get the market running. This is really a terrible consequence of the linear economy, but looking at the geopolitics around us, it is the strategic autonomy lacking the future materials that the market needs is very clear. So seeing that if you want to get some kind of the circular economy market moving, we see the ISO or the standards are one of the very key elements for setting the circular economy in motion. I will walk very fast through these slides, 3, 4. They're extremely technical, but of course they're available. But this was the initiative that is run from the Swedish Institute, where what will the European standard cover? It is narrowing very much down to the circular business models. And understanding that circular business models, actually there is, I would say, a fight or a discussion or a dialogue. I depend on how we frame it, looking at Hans and Mariana. Are business models, or are there any distinct circular business models? So what they have in common is they keep resources in use. They are based on lesser resources, more value, and we recognize them like product as a service, materials as a service. I was very inspired by you, Susanne, how you launched some new ownership Swift models, switching models from African side. But we see them recognized by subscription, it can be rental, and in end of life of any business model that is circular, you have no waste because every model or a part is modular, so you can take it back and get the material back in the economy. We also see that there is a very, I would say, populistic approach to see EPR, extended producer responsibility, be some kind of the answer to it all. But we also see extremely interesting dialogue. Is it really? And very much connecting this, is this a European market issue? No, it is not. When we see all the ways that it's exported from the European region and is landing on a variety of African regions and arenas, and with no some kind of a system how to solve the huge amount of waste mountains that are piling up. This is also should be at cross-continental talk, not only a European issue, in my opinion. We see also how to standardize the... Yes?
Sorry, it seems your slides have unshared from your side. Can you try to share them again, please?
Oh, so what do you see now? No?
Nothing. At the moment, we don't see the slides at all.
I can see the slides fine.
Okay, perfect. Then that's fine. If everyone else sees it, it's great.
Okay, so Susanna and Catherine, you cannot see it.
No, I can see it.
Okay, you listen carefully. I'll be very accurate. So jumping, it was the same kind of dynamic, how the European circular economy infrastructure and policy and market regulation, it relates very much to what is happening in the EU right now. I will tap into that very quickly now and see what will be actually some kind of the European drive, because we see the consensus and all the countries who are participating on the European standard is very strong. It all is based on the European Circular Economy Action Plan that was some kind of initiated in 2015. It gave us 15 years till 2030 to transition Europe through the European Green Deal that was launched in 2019. And on top of the priority list, how to cope with the transition, it was actually circular economy that was set at center. Suddenly, in the American beginning, when Hans and his friends started thinking about the standard, the idea of putting circular economy as center point for the just transition and market change became very clear agenda. So what we have seen is a very fine timeline. So it started with the development goals. It became the finance action plan. Last year, the buzzword was the EU taxonomy. And this year, the buzzword bonanza is the CSRD, it's the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And when we break it down to what every company within a year or two will start reporting on, it's very clear how it opens up for the circular economy. It will be at the level that every company, unit, ecosystem will need to deal with it. At the center point, also launched now this year and within the next year's time frame, is the Eco Design Directive, which sets a total new directive for how to produce whatever it's a shoe, it's a wheel, it's a car, glasses, clothes. We need to cope with how we do design and produce and what kind of material choices. We need to have much more transparency on the supply chains and sourcing. And this also involves how we distribute and retail and see service-based models, as we spoke. Can there be other models in the market than just selling and getting as fast as possible? Let's see models that are take care of the product in life cycle. It is very much connected to the movement of the right to repair after sales and keeping materials in use as long as possible, and also including the holistic narrative or perspective of end of life management, as Hans also, how do we cope with digital product passport, history of a product and material, and how do we actually take responsible recycle and circular achievements. So why does this relate to some kind of I also put up one extremely important driver is the European Critical Raw Material Act, which is implemented now. It says that within 2030, materials should contain 25% of recycled or reused materials among those who are listed as critical or strategic. This is, of course, an answer to the extremely low production rate we have on materials within the region, but it's also will be regarded as a strong driver for seeing circularity in motion. And then we have the digital product passport, which is, I would say, it shouldn't be so. It's hard to believe why it takes so long time to get it implemented, but this will be regulated and expected that any product in the market will have, not as we have human passports when we travel across borders, every product or material will have its material or product passport. And this contains specific identifiable information about the product, its origin, its use rate, its use journey, and it will connect also value chains at a level we've never seen before. And when we get to implementing the ESRS reporting, we see that on the environmental side of this, I'm just showing this granulated picture, how circular economy is pointed out extremely specific that we have to, and it will put responsibility on the owners and users. And on what it derives to is on the reporting. We are just giving you one of the very important change. Until now, a company has reported on its emissions at company level. But then when we include, which is the direct emissions that I do as a business, as an owner, but when we now introduce the scope 3, which is the history of emissions, this will be the history of the emissions for transport, what happens in the mine, what happens on the farm, what happens in every work process from until I actually got this coffee cup or I got this iPhone here. This will contain totally a different level of information, and how do we deal with that? I'm sharing also this year, it was an initiative from the EU to build stronger partnership with the Global South. So this from 1st of January, there will be established a Circular Economy Resource Center really aimed, and I really hope we could develop or investigate this together, which will be a knowledge lab, a policy lab, and a business lab, which is really directed to stronger collaboration with also regions outside of the EU, because we do risk that EU put up a wall around the European market, and that doesn't benefit any of us. So understanding, as Hans mentioned, the linear economy is deeply rooted in history. It takes quite some brave souls to challenge a 200- or 300-year-old economic system, where we used to actually take whatever we wanted out of our beautiful earth, either if it was fruits, bioeconomy, or if it's metals. And the shift is really, it is not only about a technical traceability of metals and where they come from or where they go, but we need to understand how do we build a new economic model that aligns us and that is just in its transition and that connects us. Because we need to understand that material journeys, that's maybe the chance that we got to go together on this extremely complex transition. This is the only slide I'll share from the ISO, which really shows how the circularity in motion requires us to be loyal, be empathic about the extraction, the production, the use, and the recoverability of resources. And this is what we have to evolve in the time to come. Every product we use has its own resource. And if we want them to stop having an end of life, but keep them in an internal journey, it requires quite a big shift. I'll show you a use case we have been initiating and trying to evolve in West Africa on the Ivory Coast, where we see the economic dependency on the cocoa economy is immense. It's a mono economy where the cocoa is really causing so complex troubles. But for the consumption market of chocolate, it's impossible not to relate to this. Understanding the economics of Ivory Coast, see how dependent the entire national economy is on the cocoa beans. And we now know how troublesome lots of the cocoa extraction is happening, causing natural damages, child labor, and also very unjust, less than 5% of the chocolate economy goes back to the producing country. But we also try to see the new reporting. It will actually make us responsible. Does any product cause deforestation? And it is not to prove it if it happens, but you have to prove that you do not cause deforestation. And I would say, so any chocolate consumer needs to answer, how can not chocolate consumption be part of the deforestation that has happened in Ivory Coast the last 30 years? So when we try to understand this most famous circular economy business model, the butterfly model from Ellen MacArthur, we try to map the natural resources and use the words from the ISO. How can we perform resource stewardship, which is one of the 6 pillars? And we go into the products of pineapple, the rubber, the cashew. This is really where we see the opportunity, and we can put responsibility and get knowledge of what is really happening upstream and downstream, and try to implement the circular economy. I'll finish off with this, not about, and it will demand other kind of managing models. It's not only publics who can do this or industry, but we see new governance models as network governance, where I admire so much ASEN. In Nordic Circular Hotspot, we try to connect 5 markets. ASEN is connecting 50. Full of admiration and very, very happy that we try to walk this journey together. Very happy to invite Chris White to be part of our leadership panel in Helsinki next week. This will be continuous dialogues together, how we can share and evoke the circularity opportunities. And Chris and ASEN will be together with us there. So thank you so much for being part of this journey and working together.
Thank you so very much. You're such a fine system thinker. You know, I love the way how you actually brought it to life and linked it up to the existing policies and the big shift that's going to happen in Europe. And I can't wait to ask you some really tough questions later, Catherine. I'm really excited about it. Good. Let's go on, please. I would like to call out Mariana Lopez, please. As we said, an environmental nonprofit looking at Europe's interest as well, but from a slightly different perspective. So Mariana, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Susan, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's really great to be here with so many familiar faces and be able to share the space to talk about the standards that I know we all worked on with lots of passion, and so it's really great to be able to talk about them. As Susan said, my name is Mariana Lopez. I work for ECOS. We're an environmental NGO. Actually, this year we opened our first office in the African continent in Nairobi, Kenya. So I'm very excited to share those news with everyone here. We were created about 20 years ago by other environmental NGOs, such as WWF, which many of you may know, they're pretty famous, with the sole goal to represent the interest of the environment in standardization processes. So that's one of our core missions, to join this standard development processes and try to bring the most ambitious processes forward. As just to see a bit of the extent at which we are involved, just last year, we participated in over 300 technical committees which were developing standards. So really, this is our bread and butter. So having said that, I was involved in the development mostly of the first 5904 standard on principles, and also to a less extent on the standard of metrics. So today I want to talk to you, dive a little bit more into details and share what are the things I believe to be great and about the standards, and how the standards are, from a perspective of an NGO, best place to be used for, and also what are some of the areas of concern or areas of growth and improvement, which standards are always also a bit of living documents, right? There's always, periods where you revise them and you improve them. So we're always looking at how to improve them as well. So let's just really quickly, and I'm mindful of time, so I will go through this quick, but always happy to dive deeper on the Q&A. At the end, it's always great to hear and have a conversation rather than have a lecture. So I'm going to try to speak through this. Hans already explained very clearly what the 5904 standard is about. This is the standard called the principle standard. It is a guidance standard that basically tells you 4 things. It defines key terms. It outlines the vision and the principles of the circular economy. It actually provides a list, a bit of a menu type of different circular actions that you can do. And it provides implementation guidance. Mostly, if you are an organization, it guides you how you can develop a strategy to start transitioning to the circular economy. Just as a refresher, Hans explained this in so much more detail and in a more interesting way. So what is the standard good for? This standard is fantastic if you are an organization that really hasn't started to work with circularity in a very formal way. And you want to sink your teeth in and understand, okay, how do I start? Because this standard is going to provide you a pretty good overview of really what circular economy is, what are the key principles, and how do you start to understand what are the actions that you can take as an organization. So if that's what you need, this standard is really a great piece of work. And as Catherine said, and I would like to emphasize this, and also Hans mentioned it, circular economy really needed some consensus. There are lots and lots of different views on circular economy because it's not the most simple concept. This is a complicated framework, or maybe not complicated, but elaborate framework. Therefore, this standard was a fantastic place to bring people with different worldviews together and really see eye to eye and get to agree on, what circular economy means in a way that it can represent what people across the world think. So I think from that sense, if you get this standard, it really will provide you this comfort that, okay, so many people discussed every single sentence on this standard, and it does bring consensus. Now, consensus many times means that what is there is not especially what you want to be there. Therefore, as an environmental NGO, there were some things that I agreed to, but I would have liked to see different. And so this is what I'm going to talk about next. What are my concerns about the standard? I guess the first concern, which is more a disclaimer, is that this standard is a guidance standard. It really provides a framework for an organization to get started with circularity. It's not a standard that you can use to say you're circular, right? That's not the goal of this standard. And I've been hearing a bit of confusion on this from different organizations. I think it's important to clarify what the standard is not. And it's not a standard to claim circularity, not this first standard, not right now. And then there's 3 concerns that I'd like to quickly go through of things that I would like to see improved or there are concerns. The first one is the definition of the circular economy. I'll go into more detail in a second. The second one is inclusion of energy recovery as part of the circular economy. And the third one is some use of ambiguous terminology, which tends to be the case in these big processes, but still it's a concern I'd like to share with all of you. So let's talk about the definition, which I think Hans did a fantastic job presenting. From my point of view, the problem with the definition is that it really prioritizes the idea of circulating resources. It's at the core of the definition. And then on footnotes, the notes on the bottom, it talks about the goals of reducing resource extraction, of eliminating waste and pollution, and it kind of really omits the goal of regenerating nature and instead makes a very broad reference to sustainable development. Sustainable development is just too broad and it just takes it out of context. Again, this is from my perspective. Why is this a problem? Well, as I mentioned, circular economy is an elaborate framework, but it's also pretty set in how it tells us that we will reach circularity, right? Circular economy says we need to rethink how we manage and how we use our resources. And we do it through these 4 pillars. First, we need to use resources less. We need to extract less resources, but we also just, in absolute terms, need to use less resources. Then we need to use resources longer. We do this through use, repair, refurbish, remanufacture. Then we need to use resources over and over again through recycling. And we need to make sure resources are clean. Why clean? There's no toxic materials or hazardous materials because, as many of you know, when you have materials that are contaminated, it makes it more difficult for materials to cycle, to be reused, to be refurbished, to be recycled. So it really decreases, it's a barrier to circularity. And also when it comes to renewable resources, when you want to bring materials back into the soil, if they're contaminating, you're contaminating the earth. So really circular economy brings these 4 things together. And if you don't have them, you don't have a circular economy. Now, there's nothing wrong with focusing on recycling or they're all very important. But in order to say you have a circular economy framework, you really need all of them placed at the same level of priority, not just cherry picking one versus the other. So this is a critical thing that the definition falls short on, bringing all these elements front and center and to explain circular economy is if you tackle these pillars, then you have a circular economy, this economic system, and then it contributes to sustainability and yes, to sustainable development. What is the problem? What are the implications? Well, ISO standards, and I saw there was a question on the chat, they are behind a paywall. If you want to access the standard, you need to pay for it. However, with definitions, this is different. ISO has made this dictionary of definitions public, which is extremely helpful. But when you have this as a resource, it also makes it very easy to mainstream information, definitions. And then these definitions can be adopted in legislation. Now, if you follow my train of thought, you will say, well, okay, so you have a circular economy definition adopted in my legislative framework of, you name it. What's the problem with it? Well, if the definition is very centered just on cycling, your policies are going to be really centered just on cycling. It's not providing the full picture. So this is one of the risks I see with having a definition that is not bringing all the key elements on the same level. The other is energy recovery considered circular. I want to start by saying that I do not want to discuss whether energy recovery is good or bad. That is outside of the scope of this presentation. What I want to discuss is whether energy recovery belongs to the circular economy or not. Circular economy is about keeping materials in use for as long as possible, ideally forever, right, in the economy, or back into the earth. When you burn something into energy, it stops being a material. It becomes energy. You cannot cycle it. It just goes. And so from a theoretical point of view, from EcoStand, energy recovery is just not, it just leaves, it's not on the circular economy anymore. It becomes a different activity. It shouldn't be in scope. Now, I do have to emphasize, or rather to say that the ISO standard, something that I believe it was done well, and that I'm happy that we all agreed it was important, is that although it does consider energy recovery to be circular, which I disagree for the reason I just explained, it's very clear in saying that there's a hierarchy, there's a way to prioritize your circular economy actions. And you want to prioritize them best on the actions that will bring you the highest environmental benefit, right? And so it says that when it comes to energy recovery, you need to prove that this is the action that will bring the most environmental benefit. And if not, then you need to go to whether maybe you shouldn't burn it, you should recycle it, you should reuse it, you should repair it. So this is a caveat that's very clearly explained in the standard. However, I think it's confusing to bringing energy recovery as part of the circular economy. And then the last content issue is that, and this was just a product of bringing many worldviews together in one room. But there's a number of ambiguous terms that, from my point of view, make the standard sometimes a bit difficult to explain. There are key terms, for example, pollution, that I think is core to understanding and talking and discussing circular economy. But in the standard, it was completely deleted, and instead we use harmful losses and releases, which I just find a complicated way to think about it that maybe is not accessible to everyone. And for example, other ways, other terms, just to give two examples, instead of just clearly stating reducing resource extraction, it talks about keeping the inflow of virgin resources as low as possible. It almost sounds like a tongue twister. So sometimes in the spirit of consensus, we end up coming up with very fancy, ambiguous terms that I think make a disservice to the understanding of the standard for an organization that just wants to know straightforward, what do I need to do? They need to do an extra step in deciphering some of these terms. Okay, so before I say what the standard does not, I still want to reemphasize that today I decided to focus on what are my areas of concern. I'm not saying this is a bad standard. I think this is a really good piece of work, a lot of very valuable content, super useful for any organization that really wants to get started into circular economy. However, we should understand what the standard is not about, right? And it's not defining a clear pathway or roadmap towards circularity. What do I mean by that? It's not telling you, you follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you're circular. This is not what it's saying. This standard is telling you this is what circularity is, and these are some ideas of how you can get started. And it's leaving it up to the organization to decide. It's not about setting minimum requirements, and there's no way to verify that. It's not about, this standard is a guidance standard, so it's not going to verify if the standard is just well or if it's implemented and how. And this is why it's very important to understand that this standard, you cannot use it to claim circularity. It's really just a guidance document, and a very good one at that, I believe. Suzanne, how am I on time? Because I can stop here, or I can quickly
really give some place also for questions. So
yeah.
I think
I can stop here, and there's no need to, this is the most important. So thank you, and look forward to having a discussion in a bit.
Thank you very much, Mariana. And I think I've asked without delay Honore, so that we still have a bit of time for questions and answers. Honore? If you couldn't also stick to your 10 minutes, that would be amazing. Then we have just lost 25, yeah? Okay.
Honora, you're muted, but we can see your slides.
Beautiful slides. Gorillas in Rwanda. Just unmute yourself. Yes.
I think you now can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for this important session, which has different view from different countries. I think with my presentation, you can now know what is going in Africa, especially in Rwanda. First of all, when I'm talking about Rwanda, Rwanda is the country where we have a strict policy when it comes to environment, safety, and circular economy agenda, whereby the government has put so many emphasis on projects which turns to waste into the new material or source of material. For example, before I do quickly in the presentation, I would first say that I'm called Honorenza Isenga. I'm the QHSE manager in a company called River Clays. We do fabricate, manufacture of clay building material, band, and one of the material we are using to burn our products are waste materials, which are recovered from coffee. You know, I think everyone knows drinks coffee. So we use in burning system, we use what we call coffee husk to burn in the process of burning our bricks. Let me go to quickly to the second slide. The first of all, we have to understand that normally global economy is linear. That is the fact, because we extract, produce, use, and waste. With the circular economy standard, we shall be able at least to have the extraction, production, use and recovery of the waste material to either other source of use or to other companies to be able to maybe to produce another material which are needed to our normal working life. Secondly, circular economy by ISO. In circular economy, you have I'm talking about ISO 323. We have this is the countries contributing and international organization contributing to the circular standard development activity since 2018, as Hans explained from France. This is the first meeting where we discuss how the roadmap of the development of the standards up to now. And at the end, in this year, we've managed to have the 3 series of standards that which was there to answer for the circular economy transition from linear to circular. We said that ISO 5900, the family of the standard, we have the one chaired by Hans, the one from Honore, me, I chaired 59010, and the third one, which is circular economy vocabulary principles and the guidance for implementation. So this one, 59004, this is the mother. For me, I call it the mother foundation of the standard, because all other standards which has been developed under 323 are linked to the mother standard, which is 59004. So that's why I say that this is the key fundamental standard that we all follow when we are going to develop, when we have been developing the below this standard.
4 minutes, eh? We have 4 minutes, please. And if you could still talk a little bit about the African perspective, that would be super useful.
So in Africa's perspective, in Rwanda, for example, in Rwanda, we have different companies which are now implementing the standard. You can see now on a screen that this standard, this company is called EnviroServe Rwanda. It normally connects the IT equipment, cables, electricity cables, and the plastics, and make it another items to use in environment, which are environment stuff. But also they can repair the old machines to a new machine by using those materials which are not in use. We have another company which is called Ecoplastic, which correct the plastic material and turn it to other environmental friendly material, which normally used in agriculture sectors. What I can see, there is so many challenges which I can tap on. The first one is awareness and understanding of the standard in this concept, there is a big gap to when it comes to understand the concept, the why, how, where, and who implement this standard. We need in Africa to see how maybe through ISN we can see how to strengthen and make awareness to the standard. We have also limited experts and knowledge sharing, whereby we don't have so many people who has this concept, who has understand. We all understand in general, but when it comes to details, it is very difficult to have people expressed in this one. The third one, adequate infrastructure and technologies. Implement to have correct materials. You have to map where to get the material and how to sort them and who to do that. So we still have a gap in infrastructure whereby we don't have a roadmap of how to collect the material up to the end of using the material to produce another way of materials. So we have the cultural resistance to change, where so many people still believe in the previous years, where you don't know, you just want to consume, but you don't want to know where exactly the waste are going to go, how are going to be managed. So that is the concept you have to consider. The third one is, the fourth one is again, lack of buy-in from the leadership. So we still have gap whereby the enforcement is still behind. Then we need to see how the enforcement part, policy, where the countries are developing policy, maybe education policy, maybe environmental policy. We need to have this concept on the environment, especially even in infrastructure way, so that when you're building the construction, you are constructing the house, you know exactly how are you going to manage your waste. If I'm constructing the factory, I know exactly how am I going to manage my waste. So this one goes to the leadership in the policy making, policy development, and awareness. The third one is the fourth one. I actually have tackled to everyone to 5 of the many challenges that from the perspective of Africa, we still have that lack, which I think with this kind of sessions, we are going to make sure that it is all covered. So I think those are the main parts which I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much again. Thank you for your observation. If there is any question, I'm here to respond. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honore. That was really great. That rounds it off. I want to allow for a few questions and answers, and then I will pepper you with a couple of tough questions. Can we have the audience now, please? You can raise your hand and you can unmute yourself, and then you can directly fire away. Anyone? Anyone, any question, any concerns, any experiences, any suggestions? Yeah, Mariana, you have your hand raised.
I saw there are some questions in the chat. Perhaps I thought we can talk about them a bit here, but there was a question about the makeup of the group of people that were writing the standard, and I think that was an interesting question. We did at ECOS a bit of a mapping, stakeholder mapping for the principal standards at some point, and there's always a mix, but it tends to be a bit dominated by staff from the national standardization bodies. So each country has a national standards body, and many of them send experts. So I think that was the biggest chunk of people that were involved. But then you have industry associations and private companies being the second biggest chunk. I remember for that specific meeting that we did the mapping, because this varies with meetings, it's about 30%. Then you will have academia as well, and researchers that will come be involved. You will have also consulting services that will come, people from consulting services that will come. And for civil society and NGOs, which is one of the big, it's a big topic for ECOS to try to increase the representation of civil society I think it was a bit low. It was about 3%. We weren't lots of NGO stakeholders represented in the meetings. So yeah, just to address that question.
Yeah, I think very well done. I'm just going through the chat now myself, trying to pick things up, but you guys been so good. You have already all answered those questions. But perhaps, Hans, you can just unpack a little bit, because the question was really an interesting one from Ronald. Right, was saying those ISO circular economy standards are they interoperable with other protocols and indicators? And you replied with yes, which is great to hear. Can you just unpack a little bit? What were the key things? You know, how do they align, and what are the other key things that you found that they interoperate with? Thanks.
Hans, I think you're best placed to answer a question, but if I can start and you could complement. I think, as Hans explained, the working group 3 did a fantastic job understanding state-of-the-art measurement for circular economy, which, by the way, it's really at its infancy. I have yet to see a very methodologically sophisticated circularity metric. They tend to be inflow, outflow, material inflow and outflow type of indicators. But I think the ISO, Hans and the group he convened did a fantastic job understanding what were the best practices, and even trying to improve some of those indicators or trying to bring in. So I would say, from what I've read of the standard, but Hans, please do complement, that if you're looking at CTI, which is the World Business Council for Sustainable Development indicator tools, I haven't seen what the Global Circularity Protocol is doing in terms of metrics, but if you look also at the European level of the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, there is a lot of complementarity. And if you're applying the ISO standard, it will most likely be fully compliant or mostly compliant, or you know, with these other tools, minus perhaps a few tweaks here and there that I just don't have the level of granularity in my mind right now. That will be my answer. Hans, over to you.
Yeah, Catherine, your hand was up, and then you went down, and there was another hand up from Hila. But Hans, is there anything you want to add from your side? I think as you know, having the biggest overview from all of this.
Can you repeat your question, Suzanne? Because I was looking up the liaisons we had within the technical committee, because Mariana only talked about the stakeholder groups from the countries, but we had a huge number of experts from liaison organizations, from the United Nations, different departments. I was working very closely, for example, with the experts from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and from the World Business Council on Sustainable Development on their tooling, their CTI tooling with the circularity indicators. We aligned the indicators together. They included indicators from ISO, and we included some indicators from the World Business Council. So there was a lot of more experts joining the process, Mariana, than only the country experts. I think it's important to mention that also. So what was your question when I was looking that up?
Just going back to the interoperability of the standard, but I think Mariana has unpacked that in quite some detail, and has mentioned, you know, a few key things.
Well, the alignment with other initiatives is a very challenging process within our world, because there are lots of initiatives which are doing their own, how do you say that, development. For example, the European Commission. Personally, I had 3 years of meetings with the European Commission with their advisory group to align the work of ISO and the KPIs with what the European Commission is doing in the CSRD. However, and they also refer to our work. However, there is alignment, but it's not 100% perfect.
Right.
Yes, so there, and that's the same with initiatives from the United Nations, who are working on a framework on country level and measuring the circularity performance of a country. We also had meetings with them to align what they are doing on that system level with our KPIs. Because what we've noticed is what countries are measuring on country level is sometimes not aligned with what the private industry is doing, or what companies are doing on product level. So that's why we decided to align the KPIs between the 4 levels. So from country to inter-organizational to organization and product level. You need to have consistency when you talk about measuring and assessing the performance. So,
thank you so thank you. Hila, I see your hand is up. I will not forget about your hand.
Okay.
Europe. So, and that is really a question that is burning for me, because it's amazing, Catherine. We learned about digital passports. There is a lot of emphasis now on controlling the biodiversity loss issue with the chocolate that you mentioned. We have this new thing called carbon border adjustment mechanism, which really means that, for example, carbon intensive products will not be imported to Europe. That sounds great for Europe. Okay. Now, my question is, I'm looking at this with a bit of a concern because, for example, in South Africa, our aluminium production is highly carbon intensive. It's highly polluting at the moment. And what is Europe doing? I think it's one good thing to say we don't want this and we want to kind of set the bar higher. But are there any active reach outs or support systems in place to bring the countries that deliver to Europe on par with what is required? Because otherwise I would foresee a lot of unintended consequences that countries are thrown out of the global trade, which is already, in my opinion, quite unfair in many ways. So what is your answer on that? And then I will go to Hila. Thank you.
This is not my special skill field, but as a system designer, we do tests. There is a reason why we do this alignment with Western Africa. To understand the holistic approach. Also a reason why we've also been working with feet on ground from Brazil, because we try to understand the supporting systems and they are not very strong as we see them. From the former economic, I would say circular diplomacy is maybe a buzzword I would like to evolve a little bit. How do we get the markets connected on the systems innovation that will need to happen? I am, this is my opinion, I am very skeptical if the old industries shall transform itself to the new. Very often paradigm shifts, it's never the old ones who can create their new ones. That's the body of disruption. So I'm very, I was given some ideas when we were met in Cape Town a couple of weeks ago, how if we are to actually evolve the body of circular business models and change ownership, so how could we actually try to model systems or economic supply chains or service models where Botswana, Nigeria, and or South Africa on aluminum keeps ownership to its aluminum and leases it out or rents it out to Europe, and see how could you switch the power so actually the producing countries could gain more of the value, not only taking the cost as we mainly see today. How does this resonate with you?
Sounds great. Sounds like materials as a service. I think that's another one that we have to have soon on the webinar, and you will be invited. Seeing you so excited about it too. Hila, your hand was up. Would you like still to ask your question?
Hi, nice to meet you, everyone, and thank you so much for a very, very interesting webinar and for all of your work. Actually, I think it's so needed to have a standard and to stop the greenwashing about circular economy. That's why I, as a consultant, many times avoid using that term, and I just go to the actions of, okay, how can I recycle all of my byproducts, all of my waste, and so on, and not go into the definitions and kind of strategies just to do the work, you know what I mean? But I think that the standardization is highly important because we want to have some shared language and not just have it as a term that everyone uses as much as they want. And that's why I asked Mariana about, she was saying that this couldn't be something as a certified standard, and that she answered me that there is a thought of revising it in 2026, which is close, but I'm thinking about companies now, today. They want to claim that they do some kind of circular measures in their work. What can they do, and how can I advise them to still be able to claim something and work towards having the certification in the future?
Catherine, you want to reply to this? And I think Hans.
Can I jump in just a little bit? But
yes,
Catherine will also contribute. First of all, in the ISO 323, we are planning to launch a survey That survey is going. The survey is planned to be launched in January, whereby we'll be collecting the comments from the implementation perspective. The survey will be used to do the revision of the standard, whereby in November 2025, there is a meeting which is organized in Jamaica by the ISO 323, so that when we are in that meeting, we already have the survey with comments from everyone here and other members who are using the standard currently. Then from there, with the comment we will be received, we can now see how to improve the current standard version to maybe better one, which can be friendly use or which has some requirements. Maybe in the survey, we can also have a comment to have another standard which could be has some requirements. As I think in Norway, they are proposing a standard. Japan, they are proposing a standard. Maybe those standards could be one of them to have some requirements.
Thank you very much. Can your hand is up?
Yes, I actually not directly want to answer Hila. Thank you for the comment. I really would like to. I see our ISO colleague Edward Yao is here in the room, and I really hope we can invite Edward. He has been very important connecting point for understanding, representing Cote d'Ivoire. So I know I didn't ask you, Edward or Susanne, but very much about implementing it and having seen how much training Mr. Yao has been doing. So maybe he could provide a comment from them.
Can you unmute yourself, if you're available, please? Show your face. I'm not sure. I don't think you're the call. While we figure this out, I would.
Hello.
Oh, here he is. Yeah.
Edward, there you are. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, please. Would you like to?
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear.
I would like just to thank Catherine for allowing me to speak. I just would like to collaborate, to confer on what Honore said about the challenges. And the key challenge that we are experiencing is also capacity development, training people, university teachers, university students to begin their career with understanding what circularity means and how they can build this as they develop their career path, and also get this into the academic arena. It's also a challenge that we are trying to face here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you gave me the perfect soccer ball for the goal, because I wanted to ask Hanstedt the whole time already. What do you, because I know you're very, very passionate exactly about the implementation aspect and how to go about it. So I would like to ask you, Hans, what are the possibilities that you see to support African governments and industries with the implementation side of this ISO 14000 process? How can the knowledge and capacity around this be built in African countries? Can you suggest a pathway for us?
Yeah, I can share with you the experiences of ISO, the capacity building unit, which is helping developing countries in the Asian Pacific region. And we are supporting 15 countries with the national action plans on the circular economy, and each country has to choose 2 sectors like agriculture, food, or building infrastructure or tourism. And we are supporting those countries with experts from private sector, from the governmental sector, and from the ISO National Standard Body with the development of these sector action plans, because I saw a question about sector specific implementation. We are supporting these countries with their action plans and with help of the ISO standards. And that's a whole training program, which is building knowledge and capacity and sharing experiences between the countries. And it's also partly being funded by ISO. but and partly being funded by China. So the location where we do the training programs is in China, because China is also the Chinese ISO national standard body is also funding this program. So if we can find an organization or maybe 2 organizations in Africa who are also willing to assist ISO in the funding, we can do this whole program, training program, also in Africa for African countries. And we can do it in Latin and Mid-America. And we can do it for all the continents. So I think it's a very good opportunity if we can find some funding and do it together with the ISO capacity building unit.
My head is spinning right now because, ASIN is all about knowledge networks, and that really speaks very much to the core purpose. Also, since, and that's how I met actually Catherine and Mariana. At the time, we did not have a mirror committee, and I was in Rwanda, and I was beyond frustrated that I couldn't talk. And now we have it, and ASIN is part of it. Surely we, perhaps what I need to do is really to go back to the South African Bureau of Standards, because they're hosting this mirror committee, they're organizing everything. Perhaps we need to have an offline discussion, Hans, you, myself, and SABS, and see what we could perhaps put up together in terms of getting a program started, because that's exactly what we want to do. Yeah. Catherine, your hands up. Want to help?
Yeah. Yes, I think on the capacity building side, it's really interesting to try to evolve the question that Hila Shapira actually raised. The role of consultants in the future will be, as I tried to mention, the role of network governance and be transition brokers. Because as we see it, when in a transitioning an old economy to new economy, there will always be vested interests. So how do you find those neutral conveners when you try to perform innovation within a value chain, as we have tried to do in the initiatives together with Edward Yao and Ivory Coast, just trying to look at one industry. And we know how multiple industries, you will have multiple metal industries, mining industries, bioeconomy industries, and a more systemic approach. How do we actually do have templates to do the measurement and do the KPIs that Hans has been convening the group? Who are going to actually have the responsibility of performing this and doing this? I think it's in the Scandinavian region, it has been very useful for us to get the measurement of circularity gap reports on national level. That has really put spark in the, I would say, in the bottom of our governments to understand how linear our economies are, instead of measuring recyclability, which is some kind of the problem in the linear economy. We need to understand, we have to develop the language of a fully circle and waste-free economy. This is in the beginning, and this is also where I see some of the African markets need to be at place. This cannot be because so many are resource extractors and producers, so we can. So and I would love to see the first circularity gap report in the African continent. It doesn't have to be like it was in the Nordics, but we need to have a comparability when we talk about our economics. The same thing, we need to have measures to monitor entire value chain, not only products or industries. And this is also very much unsolved at the time being.
We have an excellent circularity gap report for South Africa, which was done in partnership from the University of Cape Town, our Professor van Blatnitz, and an Austrian institute. So we learned that we are 7% circular, and I think it now is only 6% circular. So we have definitely also learned Sankey diagrams and how it works and how we can measure this. I have another question. I think it's probably going to be the final question looking at the time, and that goes to Mariana. So Mariana, we heard, we have now a first standard in place. We might not like all of it, but it's a great first piece of work. And it will be up for review. Like all standards, it's not cast in stone. They are a living document, and they will be adjusted as it go along. So given that fact that we have opportunities to refine things, can you just basically tell me, where would you like to see the ambition of the standard to get increased? Where do you think the standard could move more progressively forward? What would you like to highlight? What you like to see in another version, in the version 2 of that whole series? What are your biggest parts?
Thank you for that question. It's a big question. I think the core things where the standard could be strengthened. And I think the first one is obvious, and you all know I'm going to say that, but I think the definition could be improved a bit in the way I explained. I also think we could have a more frank conversation on that standard about toxicity and hazardous chemicals and chemicals of concern and clean materials. And I think that that's a gap that we just do not get in as much depth as I would have liked. And then there are conversations, you know, and I am not as tuned in as Honore or Hans, you know, about moving forward with the standard. If we want to create a certification system to create circularity and to claim circularity. And I think this is a very important conversation to be had. This is a dangerous move because it can really be done well, or it can really open the doors for greenwashing if it's not done well. So I guess my wish list will be to have a very, very honest conversation among the working group. And if it's decided that there is a huge appetite for some certification system to claim circularity, that then it becomes a very ambitious framework that it does not. Sometimes there is a fine line to play within ISO because the standards are paid. So you need to put forward something that it's ambitious, but that companies would also want to implement and buy. So I think sometimes that becomes a very difficult balance to play when it comes to doing something very ambitious. But if that's going to be the path forward for ISO, my wish list is that we don't compromise on the ambition. And we're really, really ISO comes to the forefront of this is the best in class, absolutely really linking to circular economy, not just a certification system about recycling and maybe a bit of reusing here and there, and maybe you know, using natural resources. That's...
Thank you so much. I think you have your 10 seconds set. I want to ask the other participants just 10 seconds, just your key thought at the point, Catherine, quickly.
I believe we must not overlook the just transition and actually the use of manpower and number of jobs. And I'm really aware of, and you learned the importance of including the people who work within, especially in the waste and recycling value chains. They have been overlooked from the European perspective, and this is really raising the agenda for that.
Great, Catherine. Music to my ears. Hans?
Yes, I have a similar, like Katrien, especially the small and medium enterprises who are working on recovery and recycling, but also they have the innovation power on designing and innovation and repair and reuse. So I think we should really not only focus on the larger companies, but specifically also getting capacity building for the small and medium enterprises.
Great. Honore, 10 seconds. We're running over time now. Yes.
I believe that first of all, we have to make sure that the capacity building is strengthened. The second one is to make sure that there is a public awareness through education by private sector in the government institutions. The thirdly is to make sure that we develop infrastructure to help the implementation of the standard. The fourth is make sure that in the next revision of the standard, we all contribute to make sure that the outcome of the revised standard will be implemented smoothly. Thank you.
I could have not asked for a better combination of experts. I think you had a fantastic narrative going, and I felt very privileged to be able to moderate today. So thank you very much. Also, thank you for the interested audience. Please watch out for our other webinars, and I'm sure that we will come back and continue to discuss ISO standards because I think they are crucial and they really are a game changer. And I think that's clear after this discussions today. So thank you very much and have a lovely day further. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Hope to see you soon.
Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.